of a metal chain into a circle and place it around a spinning cylinder, each link is pulled tight by the spin, forming a stiff, perfect ring. But if you push that spinning chain off the cylinder, it shoots forward across the floor, and because every link is already moving straight ahead, the spin keeps them locked in that circular path. The worm digs into the fish's skin, traveling through its tissues and blood vessels until it reaches the eye. And once inside, it starts to turn the fish blind. You see, at the same time, they control its behavior, making it swim closer to the water's surface. This means a bird is more likely to spot it and catch it. And once it eats the fish with the worm inside, the worm then infects the bird and lays eggs. When the bird poops in the water, these eggs hatch, allowing the worm larva to infect freshwater snails. Inside the snail, they multiply, then escape through its skin. And when they're released into the water, they seek out a new fish and start the cycle again. The giant bubble is inflated over the construction site for the machines to work inside. When they kick up dust, the bubble stops it from polluting the neighborhood, as well as keeping the noise down. And huge fans pull fresh air inside, keeping the workers cool. It measures 15 stories high, covering the same space as 3 football fields, which allows work to continue even in bad weather. And once they're done building, the bubble will be removed, revealing a brand new construction. You could shove a tampon in the hole and plug a small leak in a ship, since it holds about 1/3 of an ounce of fluid. But the Titanic's damage was much bigger, meaning you would need over 7,000 tampons crammed into the tears just to try and block the water. But even if you could plug the gaps, the ocean pressure would force water through the spaces in between, tearing the cotton apart. Instead, you would need tampons made out of Kevlar and reinforced with 15 gallons of epoxy to even have a chance of saving the Titanic. He sliced open the bear before squeezing himself inside, then waited silently as the police burst into his room. You see, the teenager had stolen a car, then filled it with fuel and left without paying. When police raided his house, he was nowhere to be seen until they noticed a giant teddy bear looking like it was breathing. They pulled the teen out and arrested him, and he was sentenced to 9 months for his crimes. As the crank is turned, gears on one side begin to spin, rotating 2 heavy metal rollers. Then a sheet of hot, soft sugar is dropped between them. Now each roller is covered in tiny carved shapes that repeat all the way around the metal. And as the rollers spin toward each other, they grab the sugar, squeeze it flat like a press, and force it into every groove and pattern. Then a long sheet of connected candy shapes comes out of the bottom. Once it cools and hardens, the thin lines between the shapes turn brittle, so the strips are dropped onto a table, snapping it apart into perfect little candy drops. Electrodes press into the fungus, and inside, a web of thin white threads carry electricity like tiny wires. As a small pulse of electricity is sent in through one electrode, the signal spreads through the threads and comes out at another point. Then another pulse is sent, and the threads slightly change how the electricity can move through them, so the signal takes different paths that the computer can read as data, which is exactly how some computer parts save and use information. Now, it's only an early experiment, but they're cheap to grow and tough enough to survive radiation, meaning one day, mushrooms could work better than normal computer chips. He wrote the message on the eggshell, and it seeped through the tiny holes and into the egg. When he boiled it, the ink would wash off, leaving the egg clean, and it was delivered to the prison with the rest of the food. Now, the guards checked everything, but since the eggs looked normal, they were allowed through. But But as the prisoners peeled away the shell, the message was revealed on the egg white. Now, people have tried to recreate this secret method, but no one has ever been able to achieve it, even though there's a $200 reward for anyone who can. This means the story is either a legend or the real recipe has been lost forever. He grabbed the bone, darted out of the butcher's shop, and raced toward home. But while crossing a bridge, he froze. In the water below was another dog, staring right up at him. And in its mouth was a bone that looked even bigger than his own. The hair stood up on his back as he began to growl at the other dog. But it growled back. He bared his teeth. He wanted the bigger bone. He jumped into the water, but his bone slipped from his mouth. He watched it sink out of sight forever. And when he looked for the other dog, it was gone too. He had lost everything because he couldn't appreciate what he already had. If you get a burn, take some skin from a tilapia and apply it like a bandage, would your injury heal faster? Well, fish skin stays moist over time, so it doesn't need to be changed as often as gauze. And the collagen inside can actually act as a natural building block for your cells. But the surface is covered with bacteria, which could leak into your wounds and give you an infection. This is why the hospital cleans their fish skin with special chemicals first before placing it over your injury, helping your skin grow without the infection.
आप GTA 5
The gas rushed out of the swollen body, causing the Pope's corpse to deflate right in front of horrified onlookers. An awful smell poured out, and his nose and fingers began to rot. Now, this happened because the embalming process was done incorrectly. Instead of draining and preserving the body correctly, they sprinkled it with oil and sealed it with plastic wrap. Bacteria inside began to produce large amounts of gas. With nowhere for it to escape, it created so much pressure that the corpse ruptured. You would plug the cord into the dashboard, making the coffee maker instantly light up. Inside, a heating element would warm the water, which would pass through a screen filled with coffee grounds. And this would pull the flavor into the water. Opening the tap would pour it into a mug, giving you a cup of fresh coffee. But since the water didn't pass through all the grounds like a normal coffee maker, it mostly just tasted like bean water. So no one really bought it. There's only a few left to this day. He slipped on the gorilla mask before flying his jet past an airplane pilot who couldn't believe his eyes. Later, when the shocked pilot tried to report what he saw, everyone just laughed at him, thinking he was imagining things. Until dozens of other pilots started seeing it too. You see, the US was testing its first jet, and it needed a way to keep it secret. So the pilot put on the gorilla mask and a derby hat, and he even chewed a cigar as he flew, making anyone who spotted him think they were going crazy. They released millions of needles into space, forming a thin metallic ring around Earth. And when radio signals were beamed up there, they would hit the needles before bouncing back down again, making radio communication possible. You see, the military were afraid the Soviets could destroy undersea cables, which would cut off all reliable communications. Now, the first launch failed when the needles clumped together, but on the second try, they spread out into a ring around the Earth. Astronomers from other countries were furious, calling it space trash. And the plan was soon scrapped, but to this day, thousands of tiny needles still orbit the Earth.
La saison 3 de
She thought it was a runny nose, but the clear liquid was not mucus. You see, 2 years earlier, she got into a car crash, hitting her head on the dashboard. This broke the thin bone between her brain and her sinuses, and the fluid filling her skull started to leak out, which she thought was just a runny nose. Soon, she was losing 2 cups of fluid a day, until doctors finally found the hole. They took fat from her belly and plugged it, finally allowing her to live normally. Cut the flap in the lid of a pizza box, then cover the hole with plastic wrap and line the whole thing with aluminum foil. Next, add a square of black paper in the bottom. Place your crackers, chocolate, and marshmallow on the paper under the plastic, and use a stick to prop up the lid. Now, if you stick it in the sun, it will reflect off the foil, bouncing down into the box, and the black paper will absorb the heat, while the plastic wrap traps it inside. And after 30 minutes, you'll have a gooey, delicious s'more. She scribbled on an egg, then pushed it right back inside the chicken. A few hours later, the hen laid the same egg again. With the words, "Christ is coming," she claimed to have powers, saying her chicken had been blessed. People came from miles away to see it, paying her coins just to watch the holy bird. Now, she wrote on every egg herself and sold fake potions to anyone who believed her, until one killed a woman and she was hanged for murder. But people still wanted her power, so they bought pieces of her skin as charms to keep evil away. If you place a hex nut in a balloon, blow it up, and spin it around inside, as it rolls along the inflated surface, each ridge on the nut hits the latex. This makes a thumping noise, but since the hex nut is moving incredibly fast, it sounds like a high-pitched whir. Now, if you use a bigger nut, it tends to move slower, which changes the sound to a lower pitch. And each time the hex nut gets bigger and slows down, the sound gets lower. But if the nut is too heavy, it will start to stretch the latex until it bursts through, popping the balloon and sending the metal flying. They held the goldfish over the tank before dropping it in as food. But instead of being eaten, it managed to escape, slipping into a drainage pipe. It swam until it reached a filtration tank, and even though it was pitch black inside, the fish was finally safe. It survived by eating scraps of food that passed through the filter, and for the next 7 years, it lived there alone. When workers finally opened the tank to clean it, they found the goldfish, which had grown to be 10 inches long. And to honor it, they gave it a real tank, where aquarium visitors could visit the fish who escaped death. They held inside the bullet, a layer of soft metal is wrapped around a tiny, super hard steel spike. And when it hits the bulletproof vest, the soft metal flattens and peels away, leaving the steel spike intact, meaning all its energy focuses on the very tip of the core. The vest's woven fibers spread the impact across the weave, but the spike slips between them, and the point drives through the fibers and any metal plates behind it. So while a normal bullet would be stopped on impact, the spike punches straight through it and into the flesh on the other side. Inside the bullet, a layer of soft metal is. She fell into a dumpster while taking out the trash, and a garbage truck emptied it and started compacting. It crushed the garbage and her 4 times, until he finally saw something moving on his truck cam. He turned off the truck and the compactor stopped, which is when the neighbors heard the woman's screams. Rescuers rushed in to help her. They used a crane basket to lift her out, and despite serious injuries, she did survive. The headsets were strapped onto the cow, showing them a green field. And when it was milked, it produced more than usual. So some people think the VR image worked by improving the cow's mood. But the headsets are actually designed for humans, showing the same image from slightly different angles, one for each eye. And since the cow's eyes are much further apart, 2 separate headsets would show 4 images in total, creating total confusion for the cow. And the boost in milk? Well, that probably just came from the headset's light, not the virtual view.
Can you believe that?
As John Wayne was filming his movie, the set was right downwind from a nuclear test site, and the wind carried radioactive dust onto the movie's cast and crew. Now, the government insisted there was no danger, and the film crew trusted them. But years later, over 90 of them got cancer, and 46 of them passed away from the disease, including John Wayne, who was killed by stomach cancer 20 years after shooting the film. Now, the government finally admitted they might be responsible, but it's impossible to know where exactly the cancer came from, so nobody knows for sure. As the bug shoots out a sticky goo, which is scraped off the tree and washed in a giant pot. Next, it's laid out on the ground to dry before getting stuffed into a long sock over a hot furnace. And as it rotates, the dried goo melts, dripping onto the tray below. It's then sprayed into an even layer and stretched by a worker using their hands and feet until it's nearly transparent. Finally, it's cut into small pieces, shipped to factories around the world, and mixed into candy to make it shiny. So when you bite into a jelly bean, you're basically eating bug goop. The bug shoots out. She poured concrete straight into the storm pipe at the edge of her yard, and the wet cement hardened inside, sealing the pipe so water couldn't flow through. You see, that pipe was part of the neighborhood's draining system, carrying rainwater underground to a nearby pond where it could collect. But the woman claimed that the drain was eating away at her yard and causing sinkholes. Once the pipe was sealed, the water had nowhere to go. Eventually, it pooled on the street, flooding her neighbors' yards and sidewalks. And the puddles became a breeding ground for huge swarms of mosquitoes. Officials ruled that she caused the problem, ordering her to fix it or be fined $300 for each day it remained blocked. The cable snapped and fell on her. The cable snapped and fell on her face. And even though people screamed, the ride operator did nothing. The girl pushed the cable off her, but part of it had become wrapped around her legs. Suddenly, the ride dropped, pulling the cable tight. It sliced right through her, cutting off her feet. And they dropped to the ground below, where a crowd gathered to watch. Now, doctors were able to reattach one of her feet, but the other was too damaged. The cable snapped and fell on her face. And even though people screamed, the ride operator did nothing. The girl pushed the cable off her, but part of it had become wrapped around her legs. Suddenly, they built up 26 stories, stuffing each floor full of pigs. Inside, food is funneled through pipes into feeding spots that can be opened with the push of a button. And giant tanks turn their poop into gas, which actually helps power the building. Trucks deliver hundreds of pigs inside, which are then moved up in elevators to different levels. And when they get big enough, the pigs are shuffled to another building to be killed and butchered before they're shipped out to be cooked at restaurants all over the country. He shoved his arm down the bear's throat, and as it slid down, the bear gagged before letting go of the man and running away. You see, when the man was out hunting, he accidentally woke up this sleeping bear. It pinned him down to the ground, and as he tried to fight back, he remembered his grandma told him that big animals have strong gag reflexes. So when it tried to bite him, he just jammed his fist straight down its throat, which ended up saving his life. He shoved his When the dial is turned, a stone disc starts spinning, which you can use to sharpen your knives. At the same time, it turns a fan inside, and when you attach a bag and a hose, it turns into a vacuum cleaner. On the other end, a notch next to the sharpening disc is designed to hold a belt, which could power a table saw, meaning you could cut wood, vacuum your house, and sharpen your knives all at the same time. He wrote, "I am awake" in his journal, and just a few seconds later, he wrote it again. Each time he felt like he was waking up for the very first time. You see, when he was in his 40s, a virus had attacked the part of his brain that saves facts and memories, causing his mind to reset every 5 to 30 seconds. He could still pour a cup of coffee, but he would forget it was sitting right in front of him. When he met a new person, he would greet them again just a few seconds later, as if it was for the first time. Now, he could still sit down at a piano and play beautifully. That's because he still remembered all the skills he learned before he got sick. And the virus didn't damage his emotional memory, so every time his wife walked into the room, he hugged her with tears, because to him, it always felt like they had been apart for years. He wrote, "If you get it just right, it'll pull on the bolt slightly. Next, use a pick to lift each of the levers inside until you feel one slip into place. Now, if you do this for each of the levers on a normal lock, you'll push all of them into the right position, allowing the bolt to slide open. But this particular lock has an extra piece of metal, meaning if you push one of the levers too far, it locks everything in place. And even the real key can't open it. This tells the owner that someone was trying to break in. Instead, they have to turn the key the wrong way to release the metal bar before they can open the lock. If you get it just right, it'll pull on the bolt slightly." He shaved the head, then began to tattoo a message directly onto his servant's scalp. After that, he rubbed a special paint into the wounds to color it. He then waited until his hair grew out completely, covering the tattoo. The servant was then sent to his allies, who shaved his head again, revealing the hidden message about the plans to rebel. He applied to be a manager at the sewage company after working there for 2 years. But instead of thanking him for his hard work, they just rejected him. So he ripped the equipment from the office and shoved it into his car. He drove to nearly 50 different sewage pumps as he hacked the systems he once built. This sent massive floods of poop into the nearby rivers, turning the water black and killing all the fish. It took days to clean up the mess, but he was eventually caught and sent to prison. As you grab the statue and pull, it would stretch like a slinky for dozens of feet. And this is because these sculptures are made by taking a sheet of paper and painting on thin strips of glue through a metal grate. And when the next sheet is placed on top, the grate is shifted slightly, making an alternating glue pattern when it's put together. And this is repeated thousands of times until there's multiple stacks. Then squiggly shapes are cut out with a spinning blade and glued on top of each other to form a blocky head. Finally, it's shaved down and smoothed with sandpaper, giving a lifelike statue you can pull apart. Just try not to drop it. As you grab, she escaped her abusive boyfriend, taking her puppy with her to a hotel. But since she worked 12-hour days, the puppy got bored and chewed through the pipes. When the hotel manager found out, he told her to get rid of the puppy or they would both be kicked out. With no other option, she called an Uber to the vet, planning to get the dog put down. But when the driver found out, she called her husband, and they both agreed to adopt the puppy instead, saving his life and giving him the home he deserved. They gave a baby a rat to play with, but then struck a steel bar behind him, making him cry. They did it again, and every time the rat appeared, the noise followed. You see, the scientists were training the baby's brain to connect the rat with the loud, scary sound. And after a while, just seeing the rat made him cry. This also caused him to fear other white objects and things with fur. This showed the researchers that fear could be taught, but the baby left the hospital before their study was finished, meaning they never got the chance to undo the fear they had created. The letter arrived just days after they bought the home, and at first it seemed to be